Dawson's Rambles.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for BoonBoomger episode 17. So this is our follow-up episode to debuting Boon Violet. We get the debut of his mech and some more context laid for the backstory, which is rather nice. I think that was probably my favorite parts of the episode in regards to the positives. It was laying down more of the groundwork of the backstory between Boondi and Boombot, talking about their past. As we knew they were tied together, we knew that Boombot originally made the controller, but we get some more insight into that as we find out that they were actually once partners, and they're kind of rivals now. They were kind of more like, I don't even want to say frenemies, they were more like teammates, and it almost seems more like Boombot was jealous and wanted to surpass him, but there wasn't necessarily like an animosity there, which I actually think is kind of refreshing because it's a little bit different than him coming in as sort of a jerk rival, because you already have kind of the jerk rival dynamic with Boon Violet, so it's kind of nice that it's more of a friendly rivalry where Violet's bot doesn't even seem to be as invested in it, but I kind of like that. And I also kind of like that we have two different things going on in a way, with the hash brown aliens attacking and then also the Grand Prix. I'll be curious to see if those storylines collide, because I can totally envision the hash aliens getting involved as being a contestant in the race if we ever see it, which would be fine, but I still kind of hope they're separate things, because I think it's kind of interesting having these two things going on for Sentai, whereas usually the main plot is just we gotta defeat the baddies. But I liked that backstory, as well as the added backstory about Boombot initially creating the controller as a way to sort of surpass his rival, but he couldn't get it to work, and then of course it's Boondi that gets it to work, and you also find out the initial team name of the two bots and whoever else was there was called the BoonBoomgers, which explains why it says BoonBoomger all over Boon Violet's suit. That almost seems like something you would write in to explain why it says BoonBoomger on the suit in Power Rangers adaptation, but I did kind of like that. It still is a little disappointing to me that that aesthetic comes solely from that like Boombot stuff, because I liked the idea that him and Taya cooked it together. But regardless, I like the backstory of it. It's like not the most interesting mythology, it's more like backstory stuff, but it's a fun little unique thing that gives the series a little bit of charm. I also am still quite enjoying Violet so far. I hope he doesn't become a full goody-goody. Obviously right now he's kind of like, why do you even care about the hash aliens? Just let Earth rot or let the hash browns have it. I'm getting a feeling, because of the way the series ends, by the end we'll see him making a dramatic, disingenuous, melodramatic speech about like, I've learned the heart of the cards or whatever, but I kind of hope it's more like one of those like jerk rival situations where he's like, like I clearly do have respect for life now, but I'm not going to be a goody two-shoes over the top about it. But I like his dynamic, as it's just a little bit something interesting, and I just hope it doesn't go too cliche. As always, you know, it's very generic. I praise the fights every week. But I do want to say, just this is sort of a new thing, even though I praise the fights every week, which I kind of did with King Oger, I have brought up before how even though I like the fights in King Oger, and I think King Oger and BoonBoomger have some of the best looking like cinematography with the fights compared to your usual generic Sentai fare, but we have to admit that a lot of the King Oger stuff was just slow-mo, whereas BoonBoomger's is legit interesting choreography, and I'm honestly impressed that every week almost all the fights feel unique. Whereas like King Oger was like, yeah, that's a cool slow-mo shot. Almost every fight scene in every episode has some sort of memorable way they fought. It isn't just like, oh, they slow-mo fired the bow. It's like, oh no, they turned upside down and fired the bow from this angle, or they like used the tire to float through the air like and spin around the enemy. So I really do appreciate that. Also, it was a pretty solid and fun debut for the mecha. I don't know why I didn't expect when he's in the vehicle for Boondi to be like literally steering it. Like that makes a lot of sense, but just seeing it stationary in the toy, you don't think about that so much, but that was fun and quirky. I also liked Boombot changing the tire for him. It was kind of a nice little character beat, but just sort of a fun little thing to make the mecha fight unique. And I've stated before when I talked about the mecha when we first saw it, I overall really liked the design. Despite the fact that the individual vehicles are still largely boring for me, the individual robots are actually all really cool with a lot of personality, my favorite word. There's not really a whole lot of negatives with this episode, mainly just the kind of core plot with the villains about like, oh, it's a weight monster or whatever. It was pretty generic Sentai fare, and also, I'm still not the biggest fan of Joe. I guess this would be more of a mixed aspect, but I liked the little bar setting they had at the beginning, but they're all kind of dressed fancy, and Joe being like over the top of it. Oh, they weren't all dressed fancy, but some of them were. But Joe being over the top about it just immediately was like, God, I just don't like you. You're just too much. But also I was a little bit endeared, not to him, but because it reminded me the episode of The Office where Jim dressed in the tuxedo and was like, is it classy enough? Also, there was some little bit of intrigue given to the backstory of them, with Blue coming in at the end teasing like, oh, I learned more about Violet's past on Earth, and then he's also looking at, not Blue, but Violet's looking at a trading card, which seems to be a racer. At first I thought it was maybe like a space racer or space associated, but it actually seems more Earth-based, so I get a feeling we'll learn more about that. I'm gonna imagine it's gonna be something like he looked up to some sort of NASCAR racer, and then he found out like, no, but The Rock's dad fixed the race, and his brother's John Cena. I just summarized Fast 9 for you. And then he was like, now I'm gonna go to space. Also Fast 9 for you. Overall solid episode, nothing too amazing or spectacular, but a decent follow-up. I think the addition of Boon Violet and more of the backstory about his involvement with the BoonBoomgers and stuff has added a little bit more going on to the show, as I certainly haven't been hating it or anything, but after that new Sentai Sheen wore off, it's just kind of like, yeah, this is a fine episode, so it's nice to have a little bit more going on, and I am curious to see what progresses in regards to sort of the main classic Sentai fight plot, as well as the race plot. But what did you think of the episode? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.